Hi, welcome to another episode of Low Carb in the Leaves with me, Dr. Mary Barson from Real Life Medicine. Happy December, everybody. Silly season is upon us. Party season, silly season, stress season, all of those things. And summer for us, lucky enough to be in the Southern Hemisphere. This week, I am discussing why the party isn't over. If you eat low carb, real food, life can still be a party. Excuse me. It's also hay fever season for me as well. Feelings are so integral to what I do with patients and clients with basically every aspect of health, but particularly with regards to food and nutrition. Our feelings, they are our physiology. Our feelings are our physiology. And what I mean by that is, what we feel literally affects the biochemical processes going on in our bodies, and the biochemical process in our bodies affect our feelings. They actually are the same. It's just a different physiological state that we feel. Sadness, anger, fear, even, excitement, lust, happiness, joy. They're all chemical processes. Coming back to feelings with food. When people come to me with wanting help with fat loss, with metabolic disease, with polycystic ovarian syndrome and fertility, all of these metabolic issues, I do what I always do and discuss using low carb real food as a way to heal the metabolism. And especially with people who aren't familiar with the low carb real food or aren't familiar with using food, healthy natural food as medicine, it always provokes fairly strong responses. And those responses can be just sort of shock, it can be anger, sometimes it's sadness, all kinds of things. And I think as people go through the transition of cutting out the food that they're used to and changing to low carb real food, that often there is a process of where people need to process their emotional response. It's a bit like grief. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in 1969 came up with the 5 stages of grief that she saw witnessing family members dealing with a dying loved one. Very, very famous, very frequently used model. The 5 stages of grief being denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I'm not for a moment suggesting that giving up sugar is completely analogous to losing a loved one, but there are often some parallels. And I thought I'd discuss the first 2 today, denial and anger. Denial can happen in a few ways. It could be that people just deny that there's a problem and that they just refuse to think about changing their food. Denial could also be when people start changing their food and are completely upbeat about it and think this is absolutely going to be fine, it's going to be totally okay, there's no problem here. And any negative feelings that come up about changing their food, the idea of missing out on pizza and beer or whatever it is, they just push down. And at some stage, those negative feelings may need to be dealt with. Depends on the people. Some people can keep a very positive attitude regardless. But anger, I'm going to skip past denial and move straight to anger now. Anger, I see a lot. And it can come out in lots of ways. My husband can eat whatever he wants, and he isn't overweight with type 2 diabetes, so why can't I? Anger, it's not fair. Why do I have to do this? Anger is an emotion that we feel usually, nearly always, in response to some kind of perceived injustice. And I had this. I remember back in my 20s, I had polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is insulin resistance, basically severe insulin resistance. I've had this my whole adult life, since adolescence. And I've always had problems with my weight relating to that. In my 20s, I was sort of skirting the upper limits of a normal weight with normal BMI, but had problems with my fertility, like other hormonal problems. And I was seeing a dietitian because that's what my doctor sent me to see a dietitian, and I was getting pretty crappy advice and following the crappy advice, regardless, to eat, all of my whole grains and to not miss a snack and to eat regularly and all those things that weren't helpful. Anyway, I distinctly remember having a vent to my dietitian about my situation, because at this time I lived in student accommodation with 30 other medical students at the rural clinical school. And so I knew intimately what my colleagues ate. I was there literally eating with them. And I ate certainly no less healthy than any of them, and healthier than many of them. And yet I was the only one, at least it felt like I was the only one struggling with my weight. How could it be that my colleagues, my peers, the same age as me, could bake cupcakes every day and have these cakes and slices and all of these things and stay really, really slim? And yet, if I had those foods, I ballooned out and I had to constantly be in this state of denial, and it just wasn't fair. I felt angry at my situation. And as I look back at that now, I think it's perfectly understandable for me to feel that way, but with a little bit of help processing that, I think I could have turned my anger into something a little bit more constructive, being able to sort of move past quickly into acceptance. And now I'm armed with lots more information. I'm a lot wiser than I was in my mid-20s. I hope so anyway. In some ways I am. And now I just accept that I have polycystic ovarian syndrome and other people don't. I have insulin resistance and other people don't. I cannot eat cake every day without seriously compromising my health, whereas other people might be able to get away with it. And that's just the way that it is. I've managed to get to a lovely state of acceptance now and can find lots and lots of joy in my life that isn't related to eating home-baked slices every single day. Point I'm making here is that negative feelings, grief around food, anger around food, around the injustice is perfectly normal and natural. And that sometimes we just need to process it. We need to allow ourselves to feel it and move through it. Negative feelings are a normal and natural part of life. And by honouring our feelings, we can tame them. Name them to tame them. And we can all find our own path to acceptance, which is a much happier place to be. All right, that's it from me today, guys. I'll see you again tomorrow, and we will continue to discuss why the party is not over. See you later.